I was working on my master's degree at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem back in 2001, and I had a little research position which was on something called the Hebrew University Bible Project. And what I would do is I would sit there in this office with no windows, and the walls were lined with books, thousands and thousands of books, and I would just sit there with my stack of photographs and a stack of printed pages, and my job was to proofread what's called the Aleppo Codex. That's the most accurate copy of the Bible in existence. It was written in the year 924, completed 924 in Tiberias by the master scribe Aaron ben Asher. And to this day, when they want to print a Bible in Hebrew, they base it on the Aleppo Codex. So my job was to make sure the printing they were doing at Hebrew University was perfect, matching the Aleppo Codex. It was very tedious.
And you were like, well back in the line. You were proofing proofreaders who were proofing proofreaders.
It had already been checked 3 times at least, or maybe I was the third. And coming along, it had been done already. Meaning by the time I got there, I'd sometimes sit there for 8 hours and be checking every little minutia of jot and tittle, and it was perfect. So you're kind of going crazy because you're looking for the mistakes. That's my job, to find mistakes, and there are no mistakes. It's perfect. So I'm sitting there and I'm doing my job, and one of the things that at that point for years I had been praying, it was a prayer I had, which is I wanted to know how to pronounce the Father's name. As I went through my studies at Hebrew University of Jerusalem, one of the things I've been told is that we don't know the vowels of the Father's name, of the name Yud He Vav He. We know the consonants, no question about the consonants. They appear 6,827 times in the Aleppo Codex, but we don't know how to pronounce that. Because in Hebrew, the vowels and the consonants are written as 2 different sets of symbols. The consonants are 22 consonants, letters, and then the vowels are a series of dots and dashes above and below and inside the letters. So my prayer was, Father, I want to call on your name. And I had read entire books with theories explaining, well, really it's pronounced Yahweh, and really it's pronounced Yehovah, and really it's pronounced, you name it. And each one had some really good arguments. But at the end of the day, I said, well, how do I know which one is the truth? What I really want, my prayer was to be able to see it, definitive evidence in the Word of God, in the Bible. Right? The Bible was preserved for us by these master scribes who were just very meticulous in their details. They preserved the pronunciation of words from one period of history and another period of history within the biblical time. It's very precise, and I thought, if only I could see how it was written in these early vocalized manuscripts, the manuscripts with vowels. But of course, as I had this job, one of the things I saw and I'd seen before is that they don't have the full set of vowels. Now, one of the things I was told, and everyone knows, it's a fact, it's common knowledge, which is that the vowels of the name Yud He Vav He in the Bible are the vowels of Adonai, which means Lord. And I immediately saw, as I was reading these manuscripts, that was simply, it was a fact and it was common knowledge, but it was factually untrue, like provably, definitively just untrue.
Okay. Now, this is coming from someone whose actual job it is to be a proofreader, proofreaders, so that the scientific, the most accurate version of the most important Hebrew document in the Jewish world is accurate.
Right.
And so this isn't,
right. Well, but really, you didn't have to be a proofreader to see that when you looked in the mass manuscripts of the Bible, and particularly at that time I had access to the Leningrad Codex and the Aleppo Codex. You'd be like me saying I have a full set of purple hair, right? You don't need to be a hairdresser to know that's not true, right?
It's that obvious.
It was that obvious that the name Yud He Vav He did not have the vowels of Adonai. In fact, what it had were 2 vowels, and there was clearly a 3rd vowel that was missing.
Why is that clear that the 3rd vowel was missing?
Well, first of all, it just was missing. It was, in other words, every letter in Hebrew in that context, there's a few exceptions, but basically every letter in a word in Hebrew has to have a vowel attached to it. If it's at the end of a syllable, then it has a certain symbol that marks that. The exception would be like a final hey, which actually the name does have. But the first 3 letters of Yud, He, Vav, He, that Yud, He, and Vav had to have some vowel symbol associated with it. Even if it was the end of a syllable, there had to be some symbol associated with each letter.
So you would say it's unpronounceable?
It was absolutely unpronounceable. In other words, it was intentionally written repeatedly in both the Leningrad Codex and the Aleppo Codex in a way that no Jewish reader who read Hebrew whether it was the simplest farmer or the master scribe would be able to read it the way it was written. It was impossible to read. And this was very frustrating to me. And I had noticed this sometime before. And I had this prayer. It was this burning desire. Father, I want to know what your name is. And not based on some man's theory, but the way it was preserved by the scribes. But the scribes didn't preserve it a way I could pronounce it. So I'm sitting there minding my own business, and I'm looking through. And you have to understand, on every page of the Bible, I'm looking at 4 sets of symbols that I have to make sure are copied exactly precisely. We have consonants, vowels, accents, and what's called Masoretic notes. And it's my job to make sure those 4 sets of symbols in the Aleppo Codex are transferred to this printed Bible. And like I said, it had been done before. And really the type of thing I was finding is, there's a little a Masoretic note and it's in the wrong position, so let's correct that and move it. I mean, it was relatively trivial things that I was able to find because it was just so precisely done. And as I was doing this, I would come across the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, saw it all the time, almost on every page, and, noticed day after day that one of the vowels was missing, making it unpronounceable. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there, and I find a place where the missing vowel is not missing. And it was Ezekiel 3:12, and it says, Baruch kavod Yehovah mimakomo. Blessed is the glory of Yehovah from his place. And I looked at that word Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, which was unpronounceable, and all of a sudden it had a full set of vowels, which were Yehovah. And just at that moment, I get a phone call, and the voice on the other end of the phone says, a plane just flew in the World Trade Center. And I thought, that's some kind of fluke. I didn't know. I didn't have internet access. I didn't, have a smartphone. They didn't exist yet. All I knew is this person on the other end of the phone said a plane. I figured it was like a Cessna or something, like crop duster, some small thing. I don't know. I put down the phone. I'm not even thinking about that. Maybe that was some kind of accident. What I'm thinking about is this a fluke? I just found the name with full vowels in the manuscript, in the Aleppo Codex, the most accurate manuscript. So I said, okay, I'm putting aside my work. My job is to check 4 sets of symbols. I'm going to check one word. And I'm going to just skim the pages, looking just for that one word to find a second witness. And I'm skimming the pages, page after page, keep coming across Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the name of the Father, and the vowels missing again, unpronounceable. And I thought, well, it was at one time. I need a second witness. I'm flipping, and then all of a sudden, after about 15 minutes, I come across it. It's Ezekiel 28:22.
Again in Ezekiel.
Again in Ezekiel. This one's actually really significant. It's a prophecy, and I was reading Ezekiel. That's why I found it there. It's a prophecy about Sidon. And it says, and you shall prophesy concerning it, and you shall say, thus says Lord Yehovah. And Yehovah there had the full vowels, Yehovah. And what's interesting there is by tradition, when the word Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh appears next to Adonai, which is Lord, you're to read it as Elohim, which is God. And so not only was this a full set of vowels showing you the name as Yehovah, by tradition, those are not the vowels that should have been in this word, yet those are the vowels the scribe put in there. And then I get a second phone call, and the person told me, a second plane just flew into the World Trade Center. And I realized, that wasn't an accident. At that time, I had no idea who was behind it, but I knew that was on purpose. And this couldn't be just an accident either. This was something this isn't a fluke, that's for sure I knew. Now, I didn't realize the full significance. It took me time to process both things, both what happened on 9/11, probably like it did for many people, and also what happened here, what I had found. And what I didn't fully realize the significance until the 10th anniversary of 9/11. I was speaking to a friend and telling, reminiscing about what had happened. And he said, you realize the significance of that timing? And I'll be honest, there's this expression, people who miss the forest for the trees. I'm not looking at the trees. I'm looking at the leaves under a microscope at the cells of the leaves, and I miss even the tree. I'm a detail-oriented person. It's just in my nature. So I had missed this. He said, do you realize at that exact moment when those terrorists flew their planes into the towers and they shouted out the name of their God? Because that's what they do.
Allahu Akbar.
That's what they do.
Allah is greater.
They proclaim the name of their God because their God is death, but they proclaim the name of their God because they're doing this in the name of their God, their death. And at that moment, the creator of the universe halfway across the world wanted his name to be known and allowed me to find this. And I'm the one who found it and didn't realize the full significance of that. And you have to understand, I really struggled with even sharing this because the tradition I come from, the Jewish tradition, really frowns on anything too spiritual. No, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. In fact, I was sharing this at a conference a few years ago, and this old Jewish man comes up to me and says, "Why did you have to share the thing about the towers and the planes? Just show us what's in the manuscript." and you know, that's the tradition I came from. But looking back now, this, to me, I'm convinced more than ever that this is the hand of God. And I'm going to share something which I just told you the other day, and I just discovered myself. And I didn't know this on 9/11. I didn't know it on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. I found this out very recently. So one of the things I didn't know is how many times in the Aleppo Codex does the name appear with the full vowels? So the Aleppo Codex is the Bible. There are pages that are missing. So from the surviving pages, we have the name appearing about 4,000 times. And the question I had for years is how many times does the name appear with the full vowels in the Aleppo Codex? But the Aleppo Codex is about 600 pages that have survived. And I had looked through about 100 of them, and I found a third place. And, you know, my assumption was that if you spent an hour, you would find another place and another hour, another place. You know, if you knew what you were looking for, that maybe every 30, 40 pages you'll find one. That was my assumption, right? Because I had found it within 15 minutes twice. So I'm sure if you did that and you had the eye for it, you'd find it twice about every 15 minutes, half hour, hour. Well, so recently I was working together with this gentleman who I call T-Bone. And I had trained him through this interaction I had with how to find the name with the full vowels in manuscripts. Now, he started out not reading Hebrew at all. And he could identify the 4 letters of the Father's name.
Right.
And he had this passion, this desire to try to find the Father's name with full vowels in more places. So I said, okay, you've done a few manuscripts. We've worked together on that. Would you like to do the Aleppo Codex? It's about, I think it's 594 pages that have survived, something like that. It's nearly 600 pages. And I figured I'm going to hear from him in 2 or 3 years. 3 days later, he contacts me. He said, okay, I went through the whole thing. The whole thing? And he sent me a list of places where he found it with the full vowels. I checked every single one. In some of them, he was wrong. In some of them, I'm like, oh, no, that's mold. Or that's, that's not a vowel. That's an accent mark called Ravia Mugrash. There's all kinds of things, little dots and dashes. You have to know what you're looking at. But at the end, it turned out there were 6 clear, definitive places that had the full vowels in the Aleppo Codex. In the entire thing. Out of 4,000 places, there's only 6 with the full vowels. And I found 2 of those on 9/11. And guess what? There's only 2 in the book of Ezekiel. If I had been reading in the book of Jeremiah that day, I wouldn't have even found 1, let alone 2. If I'd been reading in the book of Isaiah, I would have found 1, but not 2. It was only in Ezekiel that I could have found those 2 in that span of time in those sections that I happened to be reading. And I didn't realize this. I thought, okay, well, this is clearly the hand of God. After years, I came to accept that I found it at this timing. But there was a dimension I didn't even know about until recently.